October 14, 1943. The sky above Schweinfurt, Germany burns red with smoke and fire. 29,000 feet up. Captain John Mlan grips the controls of his B-17 Flying Fortress as cannon shells tear through the air. To his left, another bomber, Memphis Belle II, vanishes in a flash of fire and metal. 10 men gone in 3 seconds. His radio crackles with panic. The fighter escorts, their guardian angels, waggle their wings in apology before turning for home. They're out of fuel. The bombers still have 200 miles to go. Alone. Below them, German twin-engine fighters line up for another run. Rockets streak upward, punching holes in the formation. One B-17 disintegrates. Then another. And another. By sunset, 60 bombers are gone. 17 more are crippled beyond repair. 600 men, dead, wounded, or missing. The mission earns a name that will haunt the U.S. Air Force for decades: Black Thursday. That day, the American dream of daylight bombing, the belief that the bomber will always get through, dies in the freezing air above Germany. Because at that moment, the math becomes impossible. At a 20% loss rate, no airman can survive the required 25 missions. The war in the skies is mathematically unwinnable. But what no one knows, not the generals, not the engineers, not even the men dying over Europe, is that 5,000 miles away, a single test pilot in England has just discovered something that could flip the entire war. A discovery so simple, so obvious, that the U.S. military will laugh it off. At least at first. Because sometimes the secret that saves everything doesn't come from the top. It comes from the one person who refuses to stay quiet. By late 1943, the Allied air war against Nazi Germany wasn't just failing. It was collapsing under its own logic. Every general, every strategist, every engineer could see the numbers staring back at them from the briefing maps. And those numbers didn't lie. The theory behind daylight bombing had looked perfect on paper. Hundreds of American B-17s and B-24s, flying fortresses, bristling with 10 heavy machine guns apiece. They'd fly in tight combat box formations, overlapping fields of fire, creating what the Air Corps proudly called a self-defending cloud of steel. In Washington, it was sold as science. If the bombers flew together, they'd protect each other. No need for escort fighters. No need to wait for clear skies at night like the British. Daylight precision bombing would cripple German industry, fast, clean, efficient. But war isn't fought on paper. Germany's integrated air defense network was a machine built to kill machines. Radar stations across the coast spotted American formations the moment they crossed the English Channel. Within minutes, squadrons of Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs were climbing into their path. They attacked in coordinated waves, head-on, from above, from below, while thousands of anti-aircraft guns turned the sky into a cage of exploding steel. Every run into Germany was a bloodletting. The bombers could fight back, yes, but only within 600 yards, the range of their .50 caliber guns. The enemy could strike from twice that distance. And when American escort fighters ran out of fuel and turned home, the killing began in earnest. The 8th Air Force had already lost more than 70,000 men. At the current rate, an entire generation of airmen would vanish before the war was halfway done. Inside the planning rooms, morale crumbled. Commanders scribbled equations that never worked out. To reach Berlin, the industrial heart of Hitler's empire, a bomber needed to travel almost 600 miles from England. But the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, America's main escort fighter, had a range of only 320 miles. That meant it could protect bombers for half the journey, and then leave them alone for the rest. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning could go farther, but its twin engines were fragile nightmares in Europe's damp air. Half of them never even reached the fight. The conclusion was brutal. There was no American fighter that could go the distance. Without escort, the bombers were meat for the grinder. With escort, they couldn't reach the target. A perfect paradox, and a death sentence for thousands. Back in Washington, General Hap Arnold stared at the casualty charts stacking higher by the week. Every line he signed sent hundreds of men into the sky, and every morning they came back fewer. The press asked him for optimism. He gave them what they wanted. "We now have our teeth in the enemy's neck," he said. But behind closed doors, the truth was different. They had their teeth in nothing. Berlin was untouchable, German factories still ran day and night, and the very weapon that was supposed to win the war was bleeding itself dry. At that point, even the best minds in the U.S. Army Air Forces agreed on one grim certainty. There was no solution. No new engine ready. No fighter fast enough. No miracle in sight. Until, quietly, in a test hangar in England, a man who wasn't a scientist, wasn't an engineer, and didn't hold a single advanced degree climbed into a plane and took off. He wasn't supposed to fix the war. He was just supposed to fly it. But what he discovered next would rewrite the story of World War II, and almost nobody believed him. April 30th, 1942. Royal Air Force, Duxford, England. The war machine never sleeps, but in one corner of the airfield, a man named Ronald Harker prepares for what should have been just another test flight. Harker wasn't famous. He wasn't a general, or an engineer, or a visionary designer. He was a test pilot, a man paid to fly new planes and write down what worked and what didn't. A mechanic's instinct wrapped in a pilot's hands. The Royal Air Force had asked Rolls-Royce to evaluate an American fighter called the Mustang, a sleek, fast, but strangely limited aircraft powered by the US-built Allison engine. On paper, it looked promising. At low altitude, it was agile, quick, and smooth. But the moment it climbed above 15,000 feet, the engine choked. The reason was simple physics. The Allison wasn't designed for thin, icy air. Its single-stage supercharger starved it of oxygen. And since Germany's interceptors fought at 25,000 to 30,000 feet, the Mustang was useless where it mattered most. To most pilots, that was the end of the story. But Ronald Harker wasn't most pilots. That morning, as he rolled down the runway and lifted into the gray English sky, he wasn't just checking gauges. He was feeling the plane's soul. He dove, he climbed, he stalled. He banked so hard the wings hummed. And after an hour of throwing the Mustang through the clouds, he landed with a realization that seemed too simple to be revolutionary. He walked straight into his office and wrote, "This airframe is extraordinary. The problem isn't the airplane. It's the engine." Then came the line that would quietly change aviation history. "If we replace the Allison with a Merlin, this will be the finest fighter in the world." To understand how bold that was, you need to know what the Merlin meant. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine was the heart of Britain's air defense, the same engine that powered the Spitfire and the Lancaster bomber. It was powerful, reliable, and above all, it could breathe at high altitude. But what Harker suggested wasn't a small modification. He was proposing to rip the heart out of an American aircraft and transplant it with a British one. Re-engineer the mounts, rebalance the frame, redesign the cooling, change the propeller torque, and somehow make it all work together. It would mean rewriting everything North American aviation had designed. And worse, it would mean admitting that the US-built engine, the pride of American engineering, wasn't good enough. Harker wasn't authorized to make that kind of call. He was a test pilot, not a policymaker. But he sent his report up the chain anyway. At first, it was read and quietly ignored. The Americans had other priorities: mass production, politics, pride. They'd invested too much in their existing fighters to start over now. Months passed. The war ground on. Bombers kept falling. And somewhere in London, that single-page report, the one that could save thousands of lives, gathered dust in a file cabinet, until it landed on the desk of another man, someone with power, influence, and the same gut instinct for the truth. A former polo champion, a decorated airman, and a diplomat who knew how to bend the rules. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hitchcock, Jr., and he was about to start a fight that would shake the Pentagon to its core. By 1943, the air war was hanging by a thread. Every failed mission, every empty bomber seat, every telegram sent to a family back home was another reminder that something, anything, had to change. But in Washington, change was the last thing anyone wanted. The United States had already poured millions into the P-47 Thunderbolt and the P-38 Lightning, massive, all-American machines built with pride and political muscle. Entire production lines, contracts, and congressional reputations depended on them. And then came this rumor from England. A British test pilot, not an engineer, not an American, was claiming that a foreign engine in a U.S. airframe could outperform anything they had. To the bureaucrats, it sounded absurd. To the generals, it sounded insulting. To the defense contractors, it sounded dangerous. But to Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hitchcock, Jr., it sounded like the only hope left. The maverick colonel. Thomas Hitchcock wasn't your typical officer. Before the war, he'd been one of the greatest polo players in the world, fast, fearless, obsessed with precision. He'd flown in World War I, broken bones, set records, and never learned how to take no for an answer. Now, as the U.S. military attaché in London, Hitchcock spent his days liaising with the RAF, and his nights listening to pilots talk about the Merlin-powered Mustangs. He read Ronald Harker's report. He saw the test data. He knew it was real. And when he realized the U.S. Air Force was still ignoring it, he made a decision. He would drag the idea into the Pentagon, kicking and screaming if he had to. The showdown in Washington. January 1943. A gray winter morning in the Pentagon. A long mahogany table surrounded by generals, engineers, and procurement officers. Hitchcock walks in carrying a stack of reports, photographs, and his reputation. He's not here to suggest. He's here to demand. "Gentlemen," he begins, voice calm but unshakable. "The Merlin-powered Mustang can reach Berlin and back with fuel to spare. It flies faster than anything the Germans have. It climbs higher, dives harder, and costs less to build. We are sitting on the solution, and we're ignoring it." The room erupts. An acquisitions officer fires back. "We've already invested in the Thunderbolt. We can't just shut down production." Another scoffs. "The Lightning has the range we need." A third slams the table. "You want us to bet the entire air war on a British engine? That's insanity." But Hitchcock doesn't blink. He spreads out the data, test flights, fuel charts, climb rates. He draws one line on the map. England to Berlin, 580 miles. Then another, the Thunderbolt's limit, 320. "Every mile between those lines," he says, "is where our men die." Silence. Someone mutters about cost. Another mentions logistics. Then a voice cuts through the noise, calm, authoritative, and tired. General Henry Hap Arnold, commander of the U.S. Army Air Forces. He's seen the casualty reports. He knows the truth. "How fast," Arnold asks, "can we make it happen?" Hitchcock doesn't hesitate. North American is ready to retool. Packard Motor Company can build the Merlin under license. If you give the order today, we can have combat-ready squadrons by the end of the year. The room holds its breath. Then Arnold leans forward. "Do it." Just like that, the wall cracks. Production orders go out. North American engineers scramble to redesign the P-51 around the Packard-built Merlin. New mounts, new cooling systems, new balance calculations. Factories hum through the night. The P-51B, the first Merlin Mustang, is born. But not everyone's convinced. Critics call it Hitchcock's gamble. They say it's too late, too complicated, too political. They're wrong, because within months, silver Mustangs will rise into the cold European sky, and history itself will flip. December 1943. RAF Boxstead, England. A freezing morning fog curls over the runway as mechanics huddle around a gleaming new aircraft, its skin unpainted, polished silver to save weight. The plane hums with a new sound, deeper, throatier, angrier than anything before. It's the sound of the Merlin engine. Major Howard Deacon Hively, commander of the 354th Fighter Group, climbs into the cockpit of his brand-new P-51B Mustang. He runs a gloved hand over the throttle, feeling the vibration of something alive beneath the metal. It isn't just a machine. It's a second chance. The men call it the Cadillac of the sky. But no one yet knows if it will save them or kill them. Trial by fire. The first mission is cautious, a short escort run over France. 16 P-51Bs form up beside the bombers, wings glinting in the winter sun. The new engines roar, the planes slice through the clouds like scalpels. The mission is uneventful, no enemy contact, but when the pilots land, their faces say everything. The Mustang feels lighter, faster, deadlier. For the first time, they believe the war in the air might actually be winnable. But belief isn't proof. Proof will come only when they go all the way, to Berlin. March 4, 1944, target Berlin. The order crackles through radios across England. Maximum effort. Target Berlin. More than 800 bombers rise into formation, engines droning in perfect rhythm. Behind and above them, a second wave, nearly 900 fighters, including the new P-51 Mustangs. For the first time, American fighters will attempt to escort the bombers all the way to the German capital. German radar operators watch the blips on their screens in disbelief. The Americans aren't turning back. They're coming straight for Berlin. Sirens howl across the Reich. Squadrons of Messerschmitt Bf 109s and Focke-Wulf FW 190s scramble into the icy sky. And then, high above the clouds, the two sides meet. The sky erupts. Captain Don Gentile of the 4th Fighter Group dives on a formation of enemy fighters attacking the bombers. His Mustang screams past 450 miles per hour, faster than any American plane before. He squeezes the trigger, 6.50 caliber guns thunder. One Messerschmitt disintegrates in a burst of flame. Another spirals down in smoke. Gentile climbs, rolls, and dives again. The Germans are stunned. Their best pilots are being hunted from above. Elsewhere, Lieutenant Jim Howard finds himself alone, cut off from his squadron, facing 30 enemy fighters. For half an hour he fights them single-handedly, shooting down 6 and driving off the rest. When he lands, the ground crews count the holes in his plane, more than 100. He'll receive the Medal of Honor for that flight. But the real miracle isn't in the dogfights. It's in what happens afterward, the moment everything changed. When the bombers complete their run and turn for home, German pilots wait, as they always do, for the escorts to peel away out of fuel. That's when they usually strike. But this time, the Mustangs don't leave. They stay. The radio chatter from the bombers tells the story. "Little friends, you're still here? We're with you all the way home." For the first time, the bombers have company all the way back across the channel. Losses drop overnight. What used to be suicide runs now become survivable missions. The crews, once resigned to death, start to believe they might actually make it home. And in Germany, the shock is immediate. Hermann Göring, the Luftwaffe's chief, reportedly snarled, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the war was lost." He was right. Within months, the P-51 dominated the skies. German aces who'd once ruled the air were now outclimbed, outsped, and outgunned. By the end of 1944, nearly every American fighter group in Europe flew Mustangs, and the Luftwaffe was bleeding out. The war in the air had flipped. The forbidden engine swap, the one the experts mocked, had turned disaster into dominance. But behind every revolution is a cost, and behind every hero, a ghost. Because one man, the very one who forced this miracle through the Pentagon's walls, would never live to see what he'd made possible. April 19th, 1944. Southern England. The war has changed, the skies belong to the Allies, and yet the man who helped make it happen can't rest. Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Hitchcock, Jr., the former polo champion turned wartime visionary, climbs into a P-51B Mustang for a test flight. He's 43 years old, older than most fighter pilots, but he insists on flying. He wants to understand every inch of the aircraft he fought so hard to create. The Merlin engine growls to life, and Hitchcock takes off into the cold afternoon air. Witnesses on the ground watch as he banks low over the countryside, a flash of silver against the green. Then suddenly the engine coughs. Smoke. Silence. He's too low to bail out. The Mustang strikes the field and bursts into flame. Thomas Hitchcock dies on impact. The man who had forced the U.S. military to believe in the impossible never saw the full victory his stubbornness delivered. The forgotten visionary. Back in England, Ronald Harker, the quiet test pilot who'd first flown the Allison Mustang and seen its potential, reads the news in silence. He doesn't give interviews, doesn't claim credit. When asked about his role, he simply says, "I flew an airplane and wrote what I saw." But history would later show that single observation, if we replaced the Allison with a Merlin, had saved tens of thousands of lives. By mid-1944, the statistics told a story no one could ignore. Bomber losses dropped from nearly 20% per mission to under 4%. P-51 squadrons achieved an 8-to-1 kill ratio against German fighters. And for the first time in the entire war, the Allies had total air superiority over Europe. But behind those numbers were faces. The human cost and the silent gratitude. Years later, in 2003, at an 8th Air Force Veterans Reunion, an old man approached another. One had been a bomber gunner, the other a P-51 pilot. The gunner's hands trembled as he reached out. "You saved my life," he said quietly. March 44, over Berlin. "I saw your Mustangs dive through the clouds and drive the 109s off us. I made it home because of you. I got married. I had kids, grandkids, all because you were there." The pilot, Clarence Bud Anderson, now gray-haired and humble, shifted uncomfortably and replied, "Just doing our job, sir." But the gunner shook his head. "No, you gave me my life back." That exchange, simple, quiet, human, captures what statistics can't. Behind every technical breakthrough, every innovation, are people, those who die fighting for it, and those who live because of it. The unsung legacy. Ronald Harker lived to the age of 90. He died largely unknown outside of aviation circles. No medals, no parades, no monuments. just a name buried in the footnotes of war history. But his discovery, and Hitchcock's defiance, reshaped the fate of nations. General Hap Arnold, who overruled his own officers and approved the conversion, later wrote in his memoir, "The P-51 Mustang was the key to winning air superiority over Europe. Without it, the strategic bombing campaign would have failed. That key began not with a grand strategy or a laboratory breakthrough, but with a test pilot's note and a colonel's conviction that better was possible, even when everyone else said it wasn't." The P-51 Mustang would go on to become one of the most iconic aircraft in history. Over 15,000 were built. They flew not just in Europe, but across the Pacific, over Korea, and even into the 1950s. And today, nearly 80 years later, the roar of a Merlin engine still echoes at air shows around the world. The growl of a legend born from resistance, risk, and rebellion. But this isn't just a war story. It's a human story, about how innovation doesn't come from committees or consensus. It comes from individuals who dare to say, everyone else is wrong. The war ended in 1945, but the Mustang's roar never really faded. Long after the guns fell silent, its silhouette still haunted the skies, a silver symbol of speed, audacity, and something deeper, the power of one forbidden idea. In the years that followed, engineers and historians would marvel at the P-51's design. Its laminar flow wings reduced drag and increased efficiency. Its cooling system, once controversial, became a model for later jet engines. And its balance between speed, range, and agility set the standard for fighter aircraft for decades. But none of that was supposed to happen. According to every rule of bureaucracy, every chart, every expert opinion, the Mustang shouldn't have worked. It wasn't approved through the proper channels. It wasn't conceived in a high-level committee. It was born from a handful of people who refused to accept the limits they were handed. Ronald Harker, who saw what others missed. Thomas Hitchcock, who forced the truth through walls of politics and pride. General Hap Arnold, who risked his reputation and his career to make it real. Each of them broke a rule. Each of them defied authority. And because of that, they changed the world. When no becomes the enemy. There's a quiet truth buried inside the Mustang's story, one that repeats itself across history. Sometimes, the real enemy isn't the opposition on the battlefield. It's the resistance inside your own ranks, the voices saying, "That's not how it's done." Every system builds its own walls, walls of pride, fear, and inertia. And behind those walls, the best ideas die unnamed. But every now and then, someone climbs over. Someone ignores the rulebook, bets everything, and says, "Let's try it anyway." The Merlin Mustang was one of those bets, and it paid off in lives, freedom, and the course of history itself. Echoes in the modern world. Look closely at today's innovations, from stealth fighters to electric aircraft to space travel, and you'll find the same fingerprints. The same refusal to accept impossible. The same friction between visionaries and institutions. The lesson of the Mustang isn't just about war or technology. It's about human stubbornness, the kind that destroys, and the kind that saves. Because every generation has its forbidden engine swap. An idea that's too bold, too risky, too inconvenient. And every generation needs someone like Harker or Hitchcock to say, "We're doing it anyway." The real legacy. Today, around 150 Mustangs still fly, lovingly restored, gleaming under the sun. When a Merlin engine starts up, its deep, thunderous growl silences the crowd. For a moment, time folds. You can almost see the silver contrails over Berlin, the bomber crews looking up and whispering, "The little friends are here." That sound, that growl, is more than nostalgia. It's a reminder that courage and curiosity, not conformity, shape the world we live in. The Mustang's story isn't about machines. It's about people who refuse to stop at good enough. And yet, like every mystery, it leaves one haunting question hanging in the air. What other world-changing ideas are being buried today? Because someone somewhere said no too soon? The war ended with Europe in ruins, but the sky, once ruled by fear, now belonged to freedom. The Mustang had done what no one thought possible. It escorted bombers all the way to the heart of Nazi Germany and back. It shattered the Luftwaffe. It turned the tide of the air war. But more than that, it proved something timeless, something bigger than engines or altitude or even victory itself. It proved that progress doesn't always come from the experts. Sometimes it comes from the outsiders, the ones with no credentials, no titles, no authority, just a gut feeling that there's a better way. Ronald Harker was never celebrated. Thomas Hitchcock never saw the peace he fought for. And General Hap Arnold, the man who took the risk, never forgot how close they'd come to losing everything before the Mustang appeared. Yet together, they did something no system, no committee, no safe decision ever could. They listened to an idea. They took a chance. And in doing so, they rewrote the ending of the war. A sound that still echoes. Every time a restored P-51 fires up at an air show, people stop talking. The growl of that Merlin engine, the same sound that once thundered over Berlin, rolls across the field like a ghost from another century. Kids cover their ears. Veterans close their eyes. And for a few seconds, the world feels smaller, closer, connected by the hum of a single, once forbidden machine that saved thousands of lives. That sound isn't just nostalgia, it's proof. Proof that sometimes all it takes to change history is one person refusing to stay quiet. A final thought. If you strip away the names, the ranks, the airplanes, what's left is a lesson that outlives every war. Innovation doesn't wait for permission. Truth doesn't need a title. And the world only moves forward when someone says, I have a better idea. Because in every era, there's another Mustang waiting to be built, another forbidden solution hidden in plain sight. And maybe, just maybe, the next one is waiting for someone like you to notice it. So the next time you hear the low, rolling growl of a Merlin engine, remember, it isn't just the sound of history. It's the sound of defiance, of courage, of one simple idea that refused to die. And that, more than any bomb or bullet, is what truly won the war.